Jake Schreier, you directed 6 of the 10 episodes of Beef. How did you and Lee Sung-jin allocate which ones you were going to direct?
That's a really good question. I think it was just sort of, when I first came on, it was maybe going to be spread out differently. And then once we started cross-boarding and I kind of had to take on more episodes, sort of just whatever made sense within the kind of overall production schedule. And then he had promised me episode 9. He was like, episode 9 is going to be crazy. You can have that one.
That's the best one, if I do say so myself.
Oh, hey, we'll take it. We'll take it. Yeah.
I mean, that is the climactic episode, kind of. There's a crazy turning point, a hostage situation coming to a head. And I know Sunny has said that in his original script, there were a lot more deaths, but you and other people talked him out of it.
There were definitely more deaths. There were a lot of deaths. I think like there were even more deaths before even the script that we read. It was sort of like in discussion form, and then it got sort of weeded down, and then there were just like a couple left, and then we got it down to a smaller number. I mean, I would have gone with it either way, but I think that to some degree, like I think when he was first coming up with that, they were characters on a page, and then by the time he was finishing episode 9, it was one of the few scripts that he didn't have written before we started. And you actually get to know those characters, it becomes a lot harder to kill them off, So I think that was a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. What was you said you were cross-boarding the episode. So what was the prep like for this episode with, you have a large action set piece in the middle, and it's the biggest scope of all the episodes, really. And it's violent too. So what was the prep like?
Yeah, I mean, it was, that one, we were lucky enough that like, episode 9 is relatively contained. I mean, we were sort of at Jordan's house for a little bit longer than that episode, but predominantly we got to do that one on a block, which was nice, especially just to even kind of keep the action going and figure it out. But it wasn't like we had more time for it. I mean, it was still kind of a sprint, and we sort of relied on that idea of, character perspective, which we used a lot on the show. Where like, we didn't actually have like a very massive SWAT unit outside of that house, but you also kind of want to be with the characters and inside and not really from an objective or omniscient perspective. And we sort of used that to kind of match the scale to what we could pull off and feel it more from how the characters were seeing it. And I guess just invest our time in chair throws and things like that, chases.
Mm-hmm. I love Jordan's death scene, and I think everyone is grossed out by it, even though you don't see the gore at all. But I think it's just hearing her bones being crushed, and it just sounds gross. But yeah, how did you guys go about shooting that?
Yeah, you can blame Larkin for that one. I mean, I think in the initial script, it was just that she was crushed, and then Larkin, our incredible DP, had this idea that if you were just sort of going back and forth between Michael and Naomi reacting to that if the door just closed in the foreground of that, that would be like a very fun way to not show the death. And I think we were grossed out too, but I think the idea was just too good to pass up on that. Yeah. I think I saw Ashley again the other day, and she was like, I didn't actually know that that's what was happening. I thought she was just crushed. So she's like, I'm glad I had him process that I was in there with half of the body for the rest of the episode. So
that's hilarious. Well, at the end of the episode, you do like a bookend chase scene between Danny and Amy. And going back to what you were saying before about character perspective, this one is different than the first one in the premiere, because you see both of them, because the first one is mostly from Danny's perspective, because we haven't met Amy yet and he doesn't know who he's chasing. But we see both of them in 9, and there's a lot of wide shots. It's like much more neutral. So what went into decision to shoot it that way in that chase?
Yeah, I think, we talked a lot about that, because there are these bookends, right? They're in sort of upgraded versions of the red truck and the white SUV. It's like a red Hummer now, and like it's a G-Wagon, but same kind of cars. And I think it was just this idea, and we talked a lot about whether we should remain more kind of super character perspective grounded. But I think it was this idea that at this point in the story and the way the music, and Sunny had written Bjork into the script, and so it's not your average high octane chase music, but that there was this sense that these two characters will do this forever. You know what I mean? If something doesn't interject, if something doesn't change, if something doesn't stop it. And so there was this kind of rare time, and there is this one kind of high wide shot before they go out over the edge that's kind of meant to suggest that, like it's one of the few times. And then episode 10, which Sunny directed, like also has a lot of higher angles, which we've never used in the show
Oh, yeah,
before,
the final
where
shot.
that for sure. And even earlier when they're stranded there, and it's just kind of this idea of maybe we can finally step back from this and see, after such a crazy episode, like consider how sort of nuts this is, and how kind of like look at them in a smaller way of like this will continue and continue unless something changes, which it does in 10.
Yeah, because it's kind of like it's like more universal, and now they're finally in the finale, they're addressing their issue.
Or you could just look at it as Crow POV, which is maybe more fun.
That's true. I mean, when they started talking in the teaser, I was like, yeah.
No.
Well, you mentioned Bjork. I love all the needle drops in this show, and at the end of all of your episodes, you have a lot of great ones. You have Cornflake Girl, Steven singing Drive, Machine Head for the basketball game, Somewhere Only We Know for the fire, Mockingbirds in 8. And you've directed a ton of music videos too. So how did that inform you here in the edit when you're syncing music to picture of what you want to show and where to cut and how much of the song do you want to use?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the thing that was fortunate about it is that Sunny did have all of those written in the script, except maybe Machine Head. I think that was the one I got in, was that for some reason, like the basketball needed like a slight different contrast. But just having all of that ahead of time, it means that you can plan out, like, we had a real sense, and Sunny and I would talk about it. He had such a particular sense of where he wanted those drops to happen and at what moment in the song he wanted to cut to title card, that you could sort of plan out those shots around it, and you could kind of design like the end of 2 to line up with Tori Amos in the way that you wanted it to, or you could do that, especially in episode 8. Like we would talk a lot about, all right, this is where this lands and this is how Danny should be looking when it does. So you could approach it a little bit more like a music video, but only if you know what your piece of music is before you go into it. So yeah, we were lucky to have that from Sunny.
Do you have a favorite needle drop?
I mean, it's not in my episode, but I do think, Hoobastank was not written into the scripts, but I do remember in the edit
That's
when
my
Harry
favorite.
and Sunny,
I was like, that's when I was like, I'm in.
because you don't want to like it. And we would talk a lot about, it changes by the end, like Bjork is just that all of the music sort of needed to be great, but also just have a tiny element of cringe that you can't help but smile at it. And I think like when Harry and Sunny found that, like it kind of really defined like how the rest of them needed to feel going forward.
Definitely. Well, Amy and Danny don't actually share the screen that much throughout the show, but they're constantly connected via their phones, like just trolling each other, catfishing texts and stuff. And I think you guys, this is one of the better shows at incorporating tech and like smartphone stuff. So how did you guys go about deciding what you would show practically and what you would do with like as an overlay on screen?
It wasn't very scientific. Basically I think Sunny wanted to do everything sort of practically shot off the phone going in, and I was like, there's just, especially for what we were trying to do and the way you compose these shots and hanging in them longer, it's like you're just not going to want to cut into inserts that much. So I was trying to convince him of that, but then we basically shot inserts for everything and then also planned it for the wides and then just kind of balanced it out in the edit where it felt right. But I think that like there was a lot of discussion even just beyond the tech of like just character position, especially in episode 2, like how we kind of position them opposite each other, even if you don't notice, like, for the whole chair sequence, Amy is always, at the party is always right to left and Danny's always left to right. And it sort of feels like connecting them across
it's
space.
like subliminal when they're like,
like we tried to do that where we could make it feel like we knew, it's like, yes, they're not together much and we're going to save those moments for you, but we're also going to make it feel as though we know that they're sort of connected across the story.
Sure. Well, Jake, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much.